In a strongly worded statement, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs has said that the violent scuffle on the line of actual control was a result of Chinese effort to change the status quo on the border. The statement categorically says that Chinese forces attempted to erect a structure in the Galwan Valley, which became a source of dispute. The statement reads, and I'm quoting now, "The Chinese side took premeditated and planned action that was directly responsible for violence." I'm quoting again, "The Chinese side took premeditated and planned action that was directly responsible for violence and casualties. It reflected an intent to change the facts on the ground in violation of all our agreements to not change the status quo." The External Affairs Ministry underlined that this unprecedented development will have a serious impact on the bilateral relationship. The need of the hour was for the Chinese side to reassess its actions and take corrective steps, unquote. At the conclusion of the discussion, it was agreed that the overall situation would be handled in a responsible manner and the two sides would implement the disengagement understanding of 6th June sincerely. Meanwhile, Beijing has released a strongly worded statement after the Chinese foreign minister spoke to the Indian External Affairs Minister over the phone over the violent incident that caused 20 Indian soldiers to be killed in action. China has now released their version of what transpired and has accused the Indian frontline soldiers of violating the consensus reached at the military level talks earlier. The statement goes on to say that it was the Indian troops who crossed the line of actual control and deliberately provoked Chinese troops. China has lodged a strong protest over the incident at the Galwan Valley region. It has demanded that India should conduct a probe and take action against its frontline troops responsible for this quote-unquote provocative action. The statement mentions China's intent to deal fairly with serious events in the Galwan Valley, and it calls for the two sides to jointly abide by the military-level consensus. Joining us live on the broadcast this minute is Anna Aronrem, military correspondent for Jerusalem Post, live from Tel Aviv. Hi, Anna. Thanks very much for speaking with us here on Beyond World is One. We have just told our viewers of the two versions that have come in to that violent standoff, the face-off that took place between the Indian and Chinese troops. What's your assessment of what the situation is looking like at this point?
Well, I mean, skirmishes along the frontier are not new, but to see such a violent outbreak in which 20 Indian soldiers were killed is something that we've not seen since really 1975, I believe, where there was a confrontation again between Chinese troops and Indian soldiers, which killed, I believe, 4 Indian troops. This is something that's coming at a time where both countries can't really afford to go to war with each other. Both countries are grappling, like every country around the world, with the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's something that, while it's very, very worrisome, we have to take into account that both countries know the consequences of such a war and that they both can't handle it at the moment.
Right, Anna, at this point, it's also been said by India post that conversation that was that took place between the two sides, that India has said that it was the result of Chinese efforts, the skirmish that took place. Interestingly, this also comes at a time, Anna, when the two sides were in the process of disengaging. What do you make specifically of the timing of this incident?
Well, I think it's coming at a time, like you said, they're both disengaged and are still engaged in a deconfliction mechanism that both countries understand that they want to return to the status quo. And again, like I said, both countries engage with each other in standoffs usually. And even last month there was a standoff between troops, where physical blows were exchanged. But we have to also keep in mind that this is something that there are no weapons involved, right? There are no bullets being fired, and it is something which, on one hand, is a good thing, but on the other hand, is very brutal. When you're having people in fist fights, it's kind of medieval in a way.
Right, and when India says that it was a Chinese action that resulted in the violent face-off at Galwan Valley, China, on the other hand, earlier had insisted that it was ready to engage in dialogue. What do you make of the Chinese response specifically?
Well, I think with the Chinese saying that, yes, we want to come and meet and talk this out, shows that there is some movement on the Chinese side, that they really, like I said, want to keep the status quo, want to make sure that no violence occurs again. But when you even have the two political sides coming, and you have senior officials meeting and coming, it really has to go down to the troops on the ground, that they really have to understand the seriousness of such clashes, that it can't be accepted.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment, Anna. Thanks very much for sharing those perspectives and inputs with us. Now, that remains our top story in this edition, the violent face-off at the India-China border. The Indian Army announcing last night that 20 Indian soldiers were killed in action as a result of the physical skirmish with the Chinese troops. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has made his first public statement on that face-off with China. He expressed pain over the death of the Indian servicemen in Ladakh and said that the Indian troops displayed exemplary courage and valor in the highest traditions of the Indian Army. Sources are telling us that 4 Indian soldiers are in critical condition after the violent face-off with the Chinese troops that took place on Monday evening. The Indian Army statement confirming that the two sides have now disengaged from the Galwan area. 17 Indian troops who were critically injured at the line of actual control succumbed to their injuries due to the sub-zero temperatures and the high altitude. The Indian Army also reaffirmed its commitment to protect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of India. Casualties have been reported on both sides, according to the Indian government. In fact, the US intelligence report indicates that there are 35 casualties on the Chinese side. However, the Chinese government has refused to confirm any casualties. This violent clash is among the first to have happened in over 4 decades. On Tuesday, the Indian Army confirmed that one commanding officer was among those killed by the Chinese troops. The Indian side had reportedly gone to demolish a temporary structure which the Chinese had built in the region within Indian territory. And in response, Chinese troops surrounded the Indian soldiers and a physical skirmish followed. We have learned, as we just discussed, no guns were used during this face-off. Batons, stones, and whatever improvised weapons there were, the soldiers had at the time, were used in defense from the aggressive Chinese troops. The External Affairs Ministry of India has come out with a strong statement denouncing China's unilateral bid to change the status quo at the border. India has said that China departed from consensus to respect the line of actual control in Galwan. The Chinese government, meanwhile, the Chinese government-owned media, CCTV, has released a new propaganda video. The footage shows Chinese military exercise and troops movement, but the location of the exercise is not yet confirmed. However, CCTV has claimed that the exercise took place at the same location where the fatal clash took place with the Indian Army. While India is mourning the loss of the 20 soldiers who were killed in action in Galwan, the nationalist tabloids there, such as Global Times, are praising the China's People's Liberation Army.
该是